When I was younger, I was an atheist, and my friends would never believe that I would be the kind of guy that'd become a Christian, but I did. And as I look back, I can see that there's a lot of different things that happened in my life that caused that decision to take place. I want to share with you just 3 simple principles why I'm really happy that I decided to become a Christian and turned away from being an atheist. The first principle really has to do with how do you decide what's right and what's wrong? What is our foundation for basic morality? Reminds me of the story of this college professor that went into class the first day of school, and he told the class, he said, I just want everybody here to know that I'm a Christian and I look at things from a Christian perspective. One of the students' hands went up and he called on the student. The student said, Professor, I just want to let you know that I'm an atheist and I thought it would just be good for everybody in the classroom to know where I'm coming from. The professor smiled and he looked at the student and he said, oh, you're an atheist, huh? May I ask you just one simple question? And the student said, sure. The professor said, how do you decide what's right and what's wrong? What is the foundation for your concept of morality? The student puffed his chest up and he said, oh, that's easy, sir. He said, I'm the God of my own world. I decide what's right and wrong. The professor smiled and said, well, that's good. I'm glad that you explained that to me. I just want to let you know that when school gets out today, I'm going to go smash all the windows out of your car. And the kid said, you can't do that. And he said, yes, I can, because you see, I'm the God of my own world. I can decide what's right and what's wrong, and I don't like your attitude, so that's what I'm going to do. Well, that's just a story, but it illustrates a very important point. The point is this: if we don't have some kind of measurement for what's right and wrong, if we don't have some kind of foundation for what is basic morality, then truly it is a jungle out there. It is the survival of the fittest. And it's been a proven fact that when man is left to himself to decide what is basically right and wrong, the results are always disastrous. 2 Peter chapter 3 verses 3 through 5 tell us that in the last days scoffers shall come walking after their own lusts. These people will be scoffers. They're mocking God, and they're doing what? They're walking in their own lusts. In other words, they're walking in their own understanding or their measurement of right and wrong, their own foundation of morality. I thought that that description fits so well, their own lusts. And it goes on in that verse to say that they are willfully ignorant, talking about they're willfully ignorant about the fact that God exists and that He's the creator of all things. Why is it that people would be willfully ignorant? Why is it that they would be uninformed on purpose or would be dumb on purpose? A person doesn't want to believe in God, and there's these evidence there that show that God really does exist, then they would have to acknowledge the fact that He is the creator, which means that we are the created. And that means if we are the created, we have an obligation, we have a moral responsibility to Him. And that means that we would have to subject ourselves to His standard of morality. What a wonderful place this world would be if we'd simply acknowledge the law that God has given us, this foundation of truth and error, this foundation for morality found in His 10 Commandments. And in those 10 Commandments, the first 4 commandments talk about our moral obligation to God. And the last 6 deal with our moral obligation to each other. What a wonderful world this would be if we would simply acknowledge the foundation of morality that God's given us in His law. The second principle has to do with fellowship. Fellowship in the Spirit of God, fellowship in the principles of the truth, and fellowship with like believers. In 1 Corinthians 1 verse 9 it says, God is faithful, who has called you unto the fellowship through His Son Jesus Christ. God is actually entreating us to come into a fellowship with Himself. The first 4 commandments has to do with our relationship with God. And in the very heart of those first 4 commandments, and the 4th commandment is the Sabbath commandment. The Sabbath commandment is about commemorating that abiding fellowship and that rest with God. That's what the Sabbath is all about. It's about fellowship with God in a unique, special way that's set aside, and fellowship with like believers. The last 6 of God's commandments has to do with fellowship with one another. The principles given by the Holy Spirit, how we should treat each other. When I was an atheist, that was the thing that I was missing in my heart more than anything. And to be able to have that true fellowship that came from a body of people that were sincere believers. I had fellowship with friends, I had people that I met in bars and different people that I got to know through society and being a musician and playing with different people, but there was nothing that was comparable to people who were abiding in God's Spirit and having fellowship with one another. It's always amazed me how Whether I'm sitting on an airplane or I'm walking through the streets of Bulgaria or being in the South Pacific, that I bump into somebody and within seconds I can tell that they are an abiding, believing Christian. All of a sudden there's this bond there and there's this fellowship there that is just unexplainable. It's like I've entered into this thing that's like an extended family, a much bigger spiritual family. Considering what I just said, I was just kind of curious. Is there a possibility that there are congregations of atheists? I mean, have you ever noticed that there are not like fellowship or meeting halls for atheists? There isn't what you would call atheist fellowship. Why aren't there churches for skeptics? It made me think back to when I was an atheist and how I longed to be able to have true fellowship with real friends, a true fellowship that can only come from a deeper relationship with God. I never found that in the bars. I never found that in going to different various social events. But I did find that peace and that fellowship through an abiding relationship with Jesus Christ. The third principle has to do with our focus for living. I remember I was in Romania on a mission trip and flying back from Europe. I was sitting next to a gentleman and we got to visiting. As we were discussing things, he let me know right off that he was an atheist. But he was a very cordial individual and he was asking me questions about what we were doing. And as I started sharing with him about how our organization builds schools for indigenous children in the Philippines, and we're involved with the government of Romania helping to do rehabilitation with prisoners, and how we have health workers in Nepal and work with medical professionals, he looked at me and he said, "Why is it that you people are the ones that are always doing all this humanitarian work?" He said, "I wish I could get more of my people to do those kind of things." You know, I thought about that statement for a long time. What is our focus in life? Is it for our own self-service, or is it for the service of others? A true born-again Christian's focus is for the service of others. And oftentimes people that I know that are atheists, their focus is on themselves. I find it kind of almost humorous how my atheist friends will say things like they are anti-religious. But what they don't realize is that atheism is an established religion in America, and that religion has many different types of denominations. For instance, there is the secular humanists, there's the environmentalism, there is the Darwinism, there is materialism. But what is their focus? Is their focus on service of others, or is their focus really self-serving? They say that they don't believe in God. But when people set aside the concept of God in their life, what they do is they start to set themselves up as a God. It's one of the reasons that I really have been blessed being a Christian, because the focus really isn't self-serving. The focus of true Christianity is for the service of others. I like what it says in Romans chapter 12, verse 1. It says, "I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service." So we have the privilege of being able to have ourselves be given in a sacrificial service for others. And that's the fundamental principle of Christianity, and one of the reasons I'm so glad that I'm a Christian today and no longer an atheist.